Supply curves, like demand curves, which we just learned about, try to associate price on the y-axis and quantity on the x-axis. So what happens is we have a line that looks like this, and this is our supply line. Now, we'll think about this and look at it intuitively first, and then we'll do a little math later. But intuitively, it makes sense because you have, at low prices, very few suppliers can produce products. They're not going to make money. At higher prices, more and more people come into the market to sell, and therefore quantity supplied goes up. The logic behind supply curves is relatively straightforward. Imagine a world with many suppliers. Big suppliers, small suppliers, suppliers that make the only product or they make many products. Sometimes suppliers that don't even make any, but they could come into the market if the price got high enough. That is especially true, for example, in oil, where you might have oil producers who only produce oil when oil is high. When oil is low, they just sit on the sidelines. So many suppliers is the first assumption. The second is that these suppliers have different cost structures. These cost structures might be based off of scale. So, for example, large companies might be able to produce it more cheaply than small companies. It might be on location, so you don't have transportation costs, etc. It might be based off of readiness of supply. It might be based off the design of the product. It might be based off of labor, or many other things. But the idea here, the key important thing to understand is that the suppliers have different cost structures. Okay, so now we're going to make some simplifying assumptions. Imagine a world, many producers, each producing one unit. But again, they have different cost structures. And they all want to make money. So, if someone produces something for $5, the cost is $5 to produce, and the market price is $3, they're not going to produce it at $5 and sell it for $3. They'll just sit on the sidelines. So, imagine that world. And you have some producers that are very low-cost producers that can make a profit even when the price is very low. So they're right there. On the other hand, you have some others that cost a little more, and then some a little more, and a little more, etc. And what we end up with is our supply curve. So that's the logic behind the supply curve. As the price goes up, we have more and more suppliers come into the marketplace, and the quantity supplied, therefore, goes up. Just like when we were looking at supply curves, we have to be careful about what we're asking, what we're examining in the question. For instance, if I say, as the price goes up, does the supply shift? The answer is no. The same supply curve is here. It's still S1 in this case. S1 is not changed, but what has changed is the quantity supplied. On the other hand, things can shift supply. So, for example, an increase in supply goes this way, and we have something that looks like this. We have S1 and S2. Now, think about for a second what things would lead to that shift. For at any given price, we have a price here, at any given price, we are producing more. So we went from S1 to S2, we are producing more at any given price. What things might that be? What things shift supply? Well, you can largely put them in three categories. Changes in technology, changes in input costs, or changes in taxes and regulation. For example, a new technology comes on stage, and all of a sudden everyone can produce at this lower cost. Or an input cost, oil prices go up, and everyone's cost goes up. Or finally, taxes and regulation. There's a new tax, fewer companies will be able to be profitable, therefore they'll drop out, new regulations similarly, or anything like that. Here's a quick example of how supplies shift. So let's suppose there is a new technology comes on board, whether it's computers, whether it's automation, whether it's whatever. And, going back, this is not new. I mean, the invention of the wheel led to increases in supply. So what we end up with is a new supply curve, so that at every point you will have more produced, more quantity for every single price. So that's a shift outward in a supply curve. Supply curves can also shift down. So for instance, if you have a new regulation and suddenly some companies won't make it, we get something that looks like this, where we go S2. We go inward. So at any given price, less is produced. In our next video, what we will do is we'll put together the supply curves and the demand curves and see how interaction between the two sets the price. So here will be the equilibrium price. But we'll do that in the next video.